Okay, our webinar is starting. We are recording and we will start welcoming folks in, and happy to have you with us this morning. Going to put a little note out here. There. I'm Janda. I'm the coordinator at the EnviroHouse, and that's the facility behind me, which has been closed for 26 months, almost 27 now. And we are planning our reopening at least part-time in May, mid-May. So we will be back on site, but we are continuing to do webinars for a while until we figure out what the health situation is, because the room in there that we normally do workshops in is really close, small and kind of elbow to elbow. So we're here this morning to talk about composting food scraps, garden waste in worm bins, and John Inch is our presenter this morning. We'll introduce John in a second. I am going to put a poll up while we're waiting for folks to get in. To see what your experience is, which will give John some information on how to proceed. Well, not how to proceed, but how to direct some of the issues if you have certain particular things. So, okay, we have an answer so far. Never tried composting, but want to learn. So I'm assuming by now that most of you have learned how to do webinars and you know about the menu bar, but if not, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom, and there's a chat feature. So I encourage people to put questions in the chat because they're on the screen. If you can use the little 3 dots, the ellipsis, and make your comments to everyone, then it will be recorded, it will show up. It is set to be anonymous, so you don't have to worry about identifying yourself if you're concerned about that. We will monitor the chat. And then we don't have a lot of people signed up this morning because I think more people are looking at seeing the recorded version. So, with that, I will introduce John, and we will try to get started fairly quickly this morning so you can get finished and get outside. So John Inch is our presenter this morning, and John is one of the city's Enviro Challengers. He's been teaching environmental issues and sustainability to school kids for a number of years now. And he's a small farmer, some acreage out in the county, and he's got critters and chickens and cows and things. And so he knows what he's doing. He's been composting for a long time. So with that, I will let John get started. I'll put that information in the chat, and then I'll tell you about the upcoming webinars as we get farther through. Okay?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit my share.
I'm gonna end the poll.
Okay.
And share the results. I don't know if you can see those with the screen up, but if not.
Nice.
Can you see that?
Yep. Got
Okay.
100% that says never tried before.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and we will get started.
Okay. So yeah, today we're here to talk about composting with worms, or vermiculture, starting your own worm bin. So let's see, make this so I can read it. So yeah, my name is John. I work for the city of Tacoma as an Enviro Challenger educator. I've been with the city for over 15 years now, and been working in the schools throughout the city all that time, as well as community events and at the EnviroHouse doing talks in person, but the last few years they've been webinars like this. So it's still great to be able to reach out to the community and provide these resources. Yeah, and as Janda said, in my downtime, I am as I like to refer to, I'm a full-time, part-time farmer. So today I'll be talking about something that's important on the farm, and it's a great way to just make a great resource for yourselves. But we're talking about composting, and specifically we're talking about worm composting or vermiculture. So we'll be talking about which worms to use, share a couple of interesting facts about worms, and some fundamentals of building your own bins so that you can give this a shot, maybe over the weekend here. At the end, there will be a little time for some questions. And during the presentation, I'll do my best to make sure I check in with the chat to see if there's any questions that I can address, so that we can make sure to steer this in a more personal manner. And with that, here we go. So people often want to know, why would I want to compost with worms? But as you can see, there's a lot of great opportunities. It reduces your garbage. We get these time release castings. If you use it a lot in your raised beds, it can actually increase your tilth in your soil, so that kind of beautiful loamy soily feeling. It's simple and can be done in your basement or garage or a covered porch, which gives you a chance to recycle your organic waste, which again goes back into reducing the garbage that we create. And then we actually have these nutrients at the macro level and the micro level that are almost readily available for our plants to take up. And if you like icky things, these are a great low maintenance pet. So there's a lot of conversation about the worms. Oftentimes when people talk about worms, we use earthworm. We always talk about earthworms or night crawlers. And those are actually pretty specific. But it's important to know that there are almost 3,000 species of worms on the planet. I mean, we have like giant worms. There's a hammerhead worm. If you watch the news, you see that thing pop up every once in a while. We have marine worms. There's different kinds of parasitic worms. Worms have been decomposting things in nature forever. Earthworms are the classic worm that we often think of, and it's nature's plow and Earth's tunnel maker. So we find out after rainy nights. We find it out after rainy nights from their holes after those rains have kind of filled in and kind of made it so there's no air for them down in there, so they have to come out. But sometimes they can actually burrow down 3 feet. These are earthworms I'm talking about, and they eat organic matter. They'll actually fold leaves and turn them in a way so that they can bring it down into the hole and it folds itself up. They're actually pretty clever that way. They live mostly in a cool, dark, and most moist environment. Whereas the red wigglers, they actually are some of the greatest decomposers. They are significantly smaller in size and are often found outdoors in the top 6 inches of our soil or under pots or rocks and bricks that are on the ground and have been there for a while. Earthworms and red wigglers are often sold as fishing bait, and so, or you can actually even collect them in your yard or a compost pile. You can even actually order red wigglers online and have them delivered to your house. That is totally possible. But you can see there's a lot of differences between them, and the benefits of the red wiggler there are pretty much all of the things that we've highlighted. Small, near the surface. You can get a whole bunch of them. I think like a pound of red wigglers, there's something like 1,500 of them versus I think an equivalent number would be 500 earthworms in that same pound. So you're getting a lot more. So, earthworms are an amazing thing. Instead of teeth, they have a tiny muscular mouth, and they use a gizzard. They can kind of like rasp food off of surfaces and break it apart. And the gizzard is very similar to a bird. It's these 2 muscles that rub side by side and help to break things down. After eating some sand and grit, the gizzard actually works great for grinding up food for digestion. And it actually is a myth that if you cut a worm in half, you'll get 2 worms. You won't. You'll just get an old tail. But they don't actually regrow like that. That's not for real. That's a myth. Even though they are male and female, like the song says, it does take 2 to make a thing go right. But you won't need any candles. You won't need any music, and you won't need a romantic dinner. Once they mate and lay a cocoon, they'll lay a cocoon once a week, and each cocoon can lay something like 2 to 5 new little worms. A worm actually has the ability to eat its weight in food each day. But you need to look at the size of a worm to realize what that value means. And that's why you want to make sure that if you are going to compost with worms, that you're buying like a pound, because it'll take a pound's worth of them to eat a pound's worth of food. So, and we'll come back to that, how much they eat in a day statistic. That is just kind of like one of those overall generalizations. When we talk about a worm's home, there are a lot of options. If you're somebody that can build things and you're crafty, you can build your own perfectly well out of wood. We have a Rubbermaid bin that's also an example of a small plastic bin that you can pick up. And there actually are even these towers that are really quite convenient. They're commercially made. They're worm towers, or I've seen another one called the worm wigwam, which is round. So if you look online, those kinds of things can be found. A couple of things to be aware of, though, is that wooden bins can often absorb water in the winter months when it's really humid around here and rainy. And they can also dry out bedding that is going to be inside our bins for the home for the worms. Plastic bins can actually be found almost anywhere. A lot of our big box stores have them. You might even have one at home that's sitting in a closet that doesn't have a lid. This would be a perfect candidate for something like this. And like I said before, these towers, we can find them online, and I believe we actually have a link in our resources towards the end here, so that you can find them that way as well. The neat thing about the towers, I'll say this, the neat thing about the towers is anybody who's got one of those like ew factors or an ick factor with worms, this takes a little bit out of that equation for you, because each tray will be the new home for the worm. So they'll actually migrate upwards into a new set of bedding and a new set of food options for them, and hopefully leave behind that tray of castings ready for you to use. And a lot of the towers at the bottom have a spigot and funneling kind of system, so that the excess moisture that might build up in the tower funnels down, and you can siphon off. And in the picture, you can see a little spigot in the front of that one where you have an option to gather that liquid, and that's what's often referred to as a worm tea. All right, so we're at our poll question.
I've got so much stuff up on my screen, I kind of buried it. Okay, here we go.
What problems do you have with composting? So
Okay, so if we have a very small group this morning, if you can put in what your experience is, and because we have a small group, we can at the end unmute you so you can ask questions verbally if you want to do that. So far, the only thing we have is other. And if the person putting that answer in wants to put your issue, what the problem is, in the chat, then we can address that directly. Otherwise, we can try to do it at the end. So I'm going to end the poll. Share the results. And I will stop sharing. Did you get that, John?
Yep.
So for people who are looking at this later on the recorded version, the choices are unclear about food choices. Food doesn't break down or get eaten. It gets too wet or stays too dry. Unpleasant odors. Worms crawled out or died, and which I added after John put this slide up. And other. So there we go.
And I just looked at the chat and I saw that the other was from no experience. And that's kind of what I anticipated, because I remember first pull was that they'd never done this before. So
Right.
just following our logic paths, right? Here we go. All right, let's keep rolling here. So what a worm wants. So we need a home, some bedding, and some food. I mean, and as you can see here, the home is as simple as a Rubbermaid container. And we've got two of them in this picture here that we're going to nest inside of each other. One's got a bunch of holes drilled in the bottom, so excess liquid and air can possibly flow through, but mostly for draining off excess liquids. And then the neat thing on this one is that one of the lids can be used as the bottom, and the other lid can serve as the top. So we have it all together. But it doesn't need to be two. You can two works really nicely so that you do have that excess liquid that drains off. But if you only have one, you can do that as well. And then we see we've got bedding here that's made up of mostly, it looks like food scraps and some paper. So let's get into this. So if you are going to be using a plastic bin, which is what I've used for a long time, the two bin in one method really does work quite well. It allows you to have a convenient way of capturing the second bin is a convenient way of capturing the liquids that drain off and kind of helps to control for that moisture issue that's often a problem in our bins. But you could do the same thing with one bin and convert the lid to that plastic bin as the bottom so that the excess liquid can drain out into that, and you can contain it, and then you can use a piece of cardboard at the top. So, but if you are using a plastic bin, all you simply need to do is drill a series of holes, 1/4 of an inch in size, along the sides, you know, as you can see in the picture on the left side there. And then you're gonna fill it. You're gonna then fill it with bedding, and the bedding is going to be probably about 6 inches deep. And once you've added the bedding, you're going to add your worms. You're going to put your lid down, and then Bob's your uncle. You got your worm bin. It's pretty simple. Now there are a few more steps that we could take. Usually 4 to 6 holes around the bottom. And again, on the one on the left or the one on the right, you can see the one on the right, there's a whole slew of the holes in there. I do warn you against so many holes because it makes the bottom far more unstable. So you have to be careful. I'm a fan of using, 4, 6, maybe 8 holes around the bottom, and make sure they're at the lowest point of the bin. Don't put it up on the little ridge that's on the inside, because then the water doesn't drain out quite enough. So make sure it's on the lowest one. And if you do have that second bin, you can now nest this one inside that one and really easily collect that worm tea like you would be able to find in one of those commercial ones. If you're going to use one bin and collect the liquid into the lid that will kind of serve as the bottom, I guess, as a drip pan, a piece of cardboard will work wonderfully over the top. You can cut it to size and just let it sit down in there. Eventually, over time, you'll see that the worms will start to eat away at the top of that, at the bottom side of the lid, I guess, as it makes contact with the food and things like that. But that's okay. Just replace that piece of cardboard and you still have your lid. Now, bedding is something that is a easy solution for us. It is just simply shredded paper. It can be shredded newspaper. It can be shredded office paper. We just have to watch out for no glossy, no big black redacted statements. The old newspaper works great. The Tacoma Weekly can be found often still out there. A lot of small little publications that are around can be used quite easily. A lot of those papers are recycled content already. The inks have pretty much been converted over to mostly soy-based inks. The black ones, that's why I warned against like anything that's got like big black marker that's gone through. to block out any certain information you didn't want to get out. That kind of ink can often still be a little hazardous. So, but if you have old financial statements, you know, this is the greatest way for your financial security is to just shred them up and let the worms have them, because once they get through a worm's gut, nobody's really going to be putting that back together to steal your identity. So with the bedding, you're going to want to pre-soak it. You don't want to put it in there dry. Worms cover themselves in moisture so that they can move through certain coarse grounds, but they also breathe through their skin. So we don't want to have any of that dry material there that's going to dry them out anymore or harm them in any way, shape, or form. So we want to make sure that we pre-soak our bedding. And then we don't want it to be sopping wet. This is a point where we want to think about some other materials that we have around that get wet, like a towel after you've been in the shower. You want to think of your bedding to be about that kind of dampness. Or another analogy could be a sponge. When we use a sponge to wipe up the kitchen table after dinner, we don't want to trail a bunch of water behind. So we want a damp sponge, but we don't want a sponge that dribbles water out of it. So we want to make sure that our bedding for our worms is kind of in that same range, that damp towel or that damp sponge that we'd use. We're going to try to have, again, about 6 inches of bedding material for the worms. They do like to live in the moist, dark environments. So if you have about 4 inches, that's okay. That'll work. But eventually we're going to add more paper to this. So you're going to want to have a little backstock of paper someplace, you know, as you're shredding up financials, or you have old newspapers, just shred them into like little 1-inch sections. Or if you have a little shredder at home, just as you put them out, put them in a little container with the rest of your paper, something that's ready to go. And then if you can, keep a spray bottle nearby so that as you add more bedding, more paper to the top of your worm bin, you can spritz it so that you can maintain that moisture. That dry paper will help to absorb some excess moisture, but we don't want it to get too dry. We don't want it to dry out the bedding itself. So we want to make sure that we're balancing our moisture there. So you want to keep a little spray bottle around and spray as needed, and make sure that spray bottle is labeled clearly as water so that you don't confuse it with any other, you know, clear sprays that you might have in the house, vinegars or other cleaning agents and things like that. For our food, they enjoy what we enjoy, except it's the scraps. So you can feed food scraps like fruits and vegetables, vegetable peels, pulverized eggshells. These are all great things for your worms to have. Eggshells, it's great if you can break them up and have them smaller so that the worms can get to them a little faster and easier. If you have tea bags, this is the time where you can kind of think about getting away from ones that maybe have the staple on it, or, you know, go through the effort of pulling a little staple off and get rid of the string. That just takes a long time to break down, excuse me. Coffee grounds can go in here. We can even throw in the coffee filter. So there's another opportunity for us to make a kind of a change in our behaviors. I used to use the white bleached filters. And then once I started doing worms, I just wanted to eliminate any potential hazards that were out there. And I've always been pretty sure that there was never any residual bleach in those coffee filters, but I just switched over to the natural filters myself, and that was just my choice. So it's an opportunity for changes in behaviors. So we have all sorts of great veg that we can feed them. You see these pictures of that stuff. If you're throwing a salad together, and you got leftovers, or it sat in the refrigerator too long and nobody wanted those leftovers, the worm bin is a great place for that. And this is where we can also talk about, maybe not, one dressing fits all. So avoid pre-dressing any salads. I guess unless it's one of those ones that comes with a certain flavor profile, and you got to stick with that, then I understand. But if it's just a general garden salad that you eat, then maybe you don't pre-season it or pre-dress it. Let others make that choice, and then that way whatever leftovers are there are more suitable for the worms, because there are things that we want to avoid throwing in our worm bin. And what's really neat is for folks that live in the city of Tacoma, you can use your brown bin to get rid of a lot of products, organic materials that we wouldn't put into our worm bin. So things like meats or dairy products or oily foods like the dressing on salads and things like that. Grains that we wouldn't want to go out because they might not be appropriate for our worms. Though I do a little bit of home brewing, and I've let my worms have those leftovers. So grains are one of those ones that's kind of on the edge. But you have to watch out with grains. You don't want to throw old grains out there because they might have bugs or things like that. So, and a lot of times we don't compost these with our worms because of problems with smells or flies, or maybe they attract rodents. If you want to find out what kind of animals live in your neighborhood, I always tell people that, that's, especially with compost piles, go ahead and try compost some meat. You'll find out what lives in your neighborhood. But most of the time we don't want that experience. So avoid those issues, and you can use your brown bin. Again, if you live in the city of Tacoma, it's very convenient. When you're feeding your worms, you want to make sure that you're going to feed them in an amount that they will manage to eat. This goes back to that pound of worms eats a pound of food a day. And that's mythical. I have had worms for a long time, and composting takes time. It's not the fastest process. Worms don't have eyes, so everything's by feel. So when I start a worm bin, like I said in the beginning, it is really that simple. Some holes in your plastic container, some bedding for your worms, and then boom, throw your worms in there. But the next step is that you want to only wait about 4 days. So once you put your worms in your bin, after about 4 days, then you're going to give them food. And so you're going to put that food, especially this is where a square bin really works out, or a rectangular bin, I guess I should say, because you can use the corners and you can feed them in those very specific locations. And if you do try to limit it to a pound of food so that you have a quantity, then wait about 5 days or 4 to 5 days, and then feed them in another corner the same amount, same weight in food. Then you can begin to find out how much the worms will actually consume in a period of time, especially like 4 days or so. And this is how they get down to estimating that worms eat about their body weight in food every day. So if you feed all the way around the corners, it'll take you about a month to get all the way around, and then you do one square in the middle, and then you've pretty much done your experiment, and you'll have a much better idea of what the worms prefer to eat and what they don't like to eat, the size of things. I found long ago that when feeding worms broccoli stems, a portion that I don't particularly like to eat, if it's a big chunk of broccoli stem, it takes a long time to break down. So I kind of cut my my food scraps up a little bit more so. There are some peels that I've learned not to put in as well, like orange peels and citrus. The acids in those often repel the worms, so they stay away from them, and then they go completely moldy, or they'll attract fruit flies in the meantime. So citrus is one of the ones that I kind of keep out of my bin as well because of its potency. So, and then also I want to go back to the coffee grounds, is that coffee grounds are acidic as well, and so we want to make sure that it's just coffee grounds from us at home. We're not bringing in coffee grounds from the office, or if you got a kid that works at a coffee shop, don't let them bring home a garbage sack full of coffee grounds for your worm bins. It's too acidy. So you gotta watch out for those sorts of things. They do have that really delicate skin, and they do like neutral balanced, neutral pH type things. Excuse me. With our food, we do always want to make sure that we're keeping it covered with bedding and sprayed so that it stays kind of damp. Not soaking wet, not dripping. And this will help us to control for odor issues and hopefully control for fruit flies, which are often attracted to the odors. So that's where you want to keep a little container of some scrap shredded paper to use and a spray bottle handy. And you might even keep a pair of like old sandbox toys for kids, or a pair of old salad tongs if you got them, because every once in a while you're going to want to lift and look and see how things are going. So that will be kind of handy when it comes to doing some worm bin maintenance. So if all goes well, everything will be pretty easy. Feed them in the corners so you can keep track of their likes and dislikes and how fast they eat, what they actually do eat. Keep that spray bottle handy so that you can monitor the moisture, spritz it as needed. You know, if you got to look in there, especially if you want to keep the airflow going as you spray, water gets heavy and it can compact the paper. And as it compacts the paper down, it can reduce the airflow. So again, those a salad spoon or a spatula or the salad tongs can lift the compressed bedding. And you know, then you want to have a little extra bedding around so that we're always covering the food. And we want to watch the temperature for these too. An ideal temperature for worms is a lot like us as people. We love that 40 to 80 degree range. We're very comfortable there. Once it starts going past 80, it starts to get pretty hot, especially if we're talking about being in the direct sun. That can be a bit too much. You know, if it's in the sun for too long in the summer, that can be get it way above 80 degrees. So we got to watch out for that. And in the winter months, if it's in, you know, shadowy areas, that could possibly bring it down into, you know, sub-freezing temperatures inside that little box there. So we want to make sure that we're watching out for our temperature range for our little wiggling friends. So after we've gone for a while, it can take probably, you know, I find it can take a couple of months, 3 months before we actually get our worm castings. We're going to look for, you know, so much of the bottom of our box to not resemble the food that we put in there anymore. And we might not even find many of our worms down in that area too much anymore, because there's not a lot of stuff for them to take up. So once we notice there's probably about I generally go, you know, if it gets up to, if it gets up to about a 2-inch layer, it's definitely time to collect. But I usually get so excited if I see about 1 inch of castings in there that I want to get them out as quick as I can. This is when we're going to wrangle our worm castings. So a standard method of doing this is to inside your bin, move all of your worm castings to one side of the bin, and then on the opposite side of the bin, you can then place new uncomposted bedding, so nothing that's been chewed up, and bury some food in that side. And then after about 3 or 4 weeks, the worms will eventually migrate from the old casting pile to the new food source. So that, you know, there'll be this huge migration. So, you know, but it's like the slowest thing you've ever seen, 3 to 4 weeks. We're talking up to a month. So for the patient composter, there you go. Somebody did tell me one time that you can speed up that process if you have like any sort of like food that's like got a lot of juices to it that aren't acidic, not acidic. So we're talking like watermelon, you know, maybe grapes or things like that. And you can make this trail, this sweet fruit juice trail from the one pile to the other pile, and that will help to attract the worms and go down there. I've never tried that method, so I don't have the patience for that. So I actually like this cone method that comes up next. And so the cone method actually is pretty simple. You take all of your castings, you know, typically the bottom 1/2 inch to 1 inch if you're patient, and you put it on I take it all out and I put it on like a tarp. That way I can actually start rebuilding. I can just start rebuilding my worm bin with new food and new bedding right away, and then slide that off to the side. And then what I do is I make a big cone on that tarp. And Worms are they don't really like the light. So if you do this in a sunny spot, what will happen is the worms will actually go down to the center core of the cone, and you can begin to just kind of like push after just a couple of hours. You can just push the castings down aside, and then as you'll start to see the wiggling mass of worms. And if you have your worm bin ready, you can actually start to take the worms out and put them in their home again, and they can go back to getting used to their situation, and start working on making new castings for you. So that's my preferred method. I put some gloves on and I get to it. I like worms, so it's kind of fun for me. But if you don't like worms, it's not going to be the best method for you. So maybe that standard method, you'll have a second bin that you'll have to use. Or this is when you can contemplate one of the tower systems where the worms actually migrate up on their own. Okay, so what went wrong? So this is where we need to pay attention to our bin, and kind of use our senses. If we're touching it and it feels dry in any way, shape, or form, paper's crinkly. If you do use any like leaves or anything like that, they're crinkly. Then it got too dry, and the worms are not happy. They'll actually, you'll have worms that leave your bin in search of drier places or moister places. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're constantly monitoring that moisture. And if it's getting too dry, then you need to give a spritz, and make sure you're kind of staying on top of that. Maybe you've got too much airflow, the lid's off or something like that. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our lid closed. So in the middle, you see I love that one. I smell. Anytime our worm bin smells, we want to stop with the food. We have an excess of food in there, and this is why I am a huge fan of the feeding by quadrant, and understanding what my worms eat, what they don't like to eat. I don't like Brussels sprouts, so there's no point, even as an adult, there's just no point in putting them on my plate. I will not eat them. So if I'm feeding my worms Brussels sprouts and they don't eat the Brussels sprout, I gotta show respect and not put that in there anymore. And that's when I'll use my brown bin or something like that. That's what I learned about citrus. They just were repelled from citrus, and that's when it made sense to me, the acid. So anytime our worm bin starts to smell funky, off-putting, attracting fruit flies and stuff like that, we want to get in there and take a look at it. And feeding could be one of the very first things. So it's definitely with the smell, you want to stop feeding and then add some more bedding. When our worm bin gets too wet, it is actually going to smell as well. So that's another good indicator. It'll definitely smell very, very swampy. So you want to get in there and take a look. You might actually have to, if it's too wet, then maybe you have too many people that have access to that spray bottle and too much spritzing is going on. So you might have to have a conversation with everybody involved, and create a schedule. And we only water here, here, and here. And that way we know that we're feeding here, here, and here as well. So you might need to make a schedule. If it's too wet, then you definitely want to open the lid, let some air flow through, let some of the water evaporate out, add some bedding, get the spatula and the salad tongs out there and kind of lift stuff up, because it's probably going to be pretty compressed and compact. So you're going to want to add some bedding in there to help absorb some of the excess water. And then if it's really obviously sitting in water, like the bottom of the hole on the right side here, we want to dump out that excess water. Maybe if we had a 2-bin system and water wasn't trickling through, maybe we've blocked those bottom holes and we need to look and unplug them. Or maybe it was sitting too flat and the water couldn't flow out. So we might need to lift it up a little bit. Those are things that if we're actually monitoring our bin, especially if we're doing that maintenance, we'll notice these things: smells and moisture and being too dry. They they become very obvious when we're doing our regular maintenance. So, and with the too dry, you want to try to maybe avoid, direct exposure to sun as well. That might be an issue as well. So I would like to share with you some of my wins and losses. And as you can see, two of my biggest ones are these, being too cold and too hot. So I went to school in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, in Marquette, Michigan. And one night, it dropped to 65 below zero overnight. It was just a covered porch. It wasn't an enclosed porch. It was just covered. So yeah, I don't know if I need to say anymore. My worms froze. Even here in Tacoma. So that was back in the mid 90s that happened to me. But here in Tacoma, even in, oh gosh, it was probably a decade ago now. We had a cold snap of several weeks, and I had actually gone back home to visit family. And when I came back, I pretty much came back to my worms frozen in their bin on my back porch. So that didn't go over well. As robust as worms are, freezing and thawing is really difficult on them. So needless to say, watch those colder temperatures, bring them in, cover them with a blanket. If they're on a covered porch, just find a bunch of old blankets or something like that. If you got an old army sleeping bag or an old slumber bag, wrap that over them. Just cover them up just for the night. That way they'll have just a little extra insulation to protect them from those cold nights. I mean, we don't have a bunch of cold nights here in in Tacoma, but between Christmas and New Year's here this last season, it was pretty cold for a long extended period of time. So, even an old shipping blanket would be great to throw over the top of them. But let's go to the other side of the spectrum here. When I first moved out here in 1998, I was new to Washington, and at first I just never believed it was really going to get too hot. And that was the first time I experienced a Washington heat wave. It was 2 days of 90-degree temperatures. I know last summer we buried that, but this was back in 98. So that was pretty unheard of then. I actually left to go out the coast because somebody said it's much cooler at the coast. And so we went up to the coast for 3 days. And when I came back, my worm bin had sat in the sunlight for the better part of the day for each of those 90+ degree days. And it just fried most of the worms that were in the bin. There were a bunch of them that had actually crawled out of the bin trying to make their exodus to find a cooler place. And they ended up perishing outside the bin. It was it was a nightmare. So, I didn't think too much about that sunlight and protecting them from that. And that's where I learned that, direct sunlight for even a small portion of a day on a hot, sunny summer day isn't really comfortable for the worm. So again, thinking about ourselves, unless you're an absolute sun worshiper, once it starts to creep above 90 degrees, 80 degrees here, it's getting to be a little too hot. It's a little too uncomfortable for the worm. So if you've got a garage, throw them in the garage. If you've got a basement, maybe you can put them in the basement. Don't forget about them in the basement. But that might be an option. Or, if you can have a conversation in the house about the benefits that worms provide and the ease of getting rid of your food waste, you might even be able to wrangle some space under the kitchen sink. Just saying, it's a possibility. So those are some of my wins and losses, and I share that with you so that you understand that I am by no means an expert. We all make mistakes. To err is human, and we're all just merely human. So at this point, I will take any questions or comments. So because I believe we still only had one person, if you'd like to unmute we can go ahead and address anything.
And I don't think we need to unmute her, but if there are questions, you can raise your hand or. Okay, and I'm adding those resources in the chat as well.
That's just a fun book to read.
Yeah.
The Earth Moved, just a fun book to read. And if you've got kids and you were looking to make worms fun too.
Take it in a little closer to the camera. It's hard to see.
How's that?
No, it's not very clear. Is that the one of Let It Rot?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop my share.
Okay.
Oh, I see why. Here, let me come in. I have to share the space.
Yeah, that's better.
It's because of the blurry aspect.
Yeah.
Here,
Okay.
let's see.
That's good.
And then the other one, The Earth Moved. This is a great resource.
Yeah. And I've read that one too. I really enjoyed that. Amy Stewart is a great writer, and I've read 2 or 3 of her other books. She isn't doing the nonfiction anymore, but she does a ton of research. So if that's the kind of interested in, she went all over the world for The Earth Moved. And the interesting thing that got her into writing that book was when she had discovered that a study of worms was Darwin's last exploration of ideas before he died. And she got interested in this was everywhere.
Yeah, I keep looking for anything that was published by Darwin on worms. Every time I go to like any of the used bookstores, I always look to see. It's always origin of the species and that sort of stuff. I really would love to read some of that. That'd be just very entertaining. Yeah.
So I have put other things in the chat. I'm not going to put the workshops in right now because they will be over by the time people, not by the time, but soon after people are viewing this as a recorded version. But you can copy from the chat if you want to get those now. Just do Control-All and Control-C to copy whatever is in the chat, and then you can paste that into a Word doc or a email or whatever you have handy. So I think that's most of what we have here. Coming up next week, we're doing herbs, how to grow and use and preserve herbs with Jenny Call, who's another one of our local farm-grown girls, who's a teacher and also a small farmer out in Midway? Out
Midland?
Midland, yeah, out in Midland. Thank you for joining us, and hope you learned something. This should be up for reviewing in another few days. If you have any questions, I just put my email and information in the chat, and you can send a message and I can pass it on to John if I need to, if I can't answer it. So thank you again, and thank you, John, as usual, and I will see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great day.